president wants to spy on 200 million Americans without a warrant. Has he read this document, which he was sworn to uphold?
Now, I will not have you libel Abraham Lincoln.
I don't understand the problem with registering guns. We register cars.
Mark Levine brings you the news the government doesn't want you to know.
Today, an explosive story about connections between white supremacists and Islamic terrorists.
When there's a conflict between Scalia's conservative values and the Constitution of the United States, he throws away the Constitution.
When we do have secret prisons, that is not what America's all about.
Let's go to Mark in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good evening, America. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. Climate change is something that has really become more understood as we see the Arctic ice melting, as we see whole portions of the ice shelf of Antarctica coming off. We see even the ships in Norfolk, Virginia, having to raise the pier levels, and countries in the Pacific worried that their beachfront is going to be gone soon. It's increasingly a problem, and the real question is, what is anybody doing about it? The Democrats and Republicans are arguing. The Democrats want to do a cap-and-trade type system where we try to reduce carbon. The Republicans claim it's not a problem at all. Well, sometimes I wonder if our citizens need to get involved, and the person who would know how to do this best is the guy I'm about to talk to. His name is Marshall Saunders, and he's the founder of Citizens Climate Lobby. Marshall, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here.
It's a privilege to have you. We've talked before, and it's good to have you on again. How did you come involved in the issue of climate change? When did that first start to concern you?
Well, I think it actually began when I was in the microcredit field. I was in Central America and the South American continent, not seeing the cathedrals, but being out in the country with the poor people. And I saw a lot of rivers had dried up. And then when I went home to my boyhood home, I found that the little creek that ran in the back of our house, that it had dried up too. And I just began to read news reports that there were 6 inches of rain or 10 inches of rain somewhere, and I thought, this is just crazy. And so that was kind of the beginning of it.
How long ago was this that you first?
That was in 2000, early 2000s, but I just didn't know what to do. I wanted to do something, but I didn't quite know what to do about it.
And before then, you were actually in the oil industry.
Did you say New Orleans?
No, the oil industry, the petroleum industry.
Oh, yes, that is true. I was a top dog salesman at Shell Oil Company and having a big time. That was early in my career. And
so
yeah.
Are you a bit of a turncoat? I mean, the industry is probably causing pollution, carbon pollution, more than almost any other. How do you feel about switching sides on this?
Well, I'm glad to have switched sides. I come from Central Texas, and we're all right-wing conservatives down there, most of us. And so, yeah, there's been a big change in me.
So was it the kind of thing that came slow over time, or was there sort of an epiphanal moment when you're like, oh my God, our country, our world is in trouble?
Well, I think it came over time. I was just increasingly worried, but again, not knowing what to do. And then I read somewhere, and I don't remember where at all, but it said that in another 5 years, climate change is the only thing that people are going to be talking about. And I thought, that is true.
So you decided to get citizens involved. What does that mean? I mean, too often in Washington, we have all these lobbies of, like Shell Oil, of corporations. How do you do a citizens lobby?
Well, here's the thing. During the last, beginning at about 1994 until about 2006, when I started Citizens Climate Lobby, I was a lobbyist with an organization called Results. And Results lobbied for funding for AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, basic health, basic education. And I learned how to lobby with them, and it was an organization that taught people in the towns and cities of America how to lobby their members of Congress.
You don't just, I mean, look, I used to work, as you know, Marshall, I used to work for Congressman Barney Frank. I worked there. It's not as hard as people think it is. You pick up the phone and call, or send an email, or maybe write a letter, though frankly, that's the least people do these days. Are people reluctant when they care about something to take the next step and contact a member of Congress?
Yeah, of course they're reluctant, but they are also resigned. And they think that they can't do anything. They don't know that they can go to their congressman's public forum and pick up the phone, as you say, and call, and to make an appointment and go see them. But individuals don't want to do that by themselves, and frankly, it's not very effective to do it by yourself. So you got to organize, make demands, and make it good government. Good politics for governments to respond.
So how long has the Citizens Climate Lobby been around?
Well, we started, I called it night 2007, October 2007. I called everybody I knew that I thought might be interested, and we met in the public library up in a little town up north of San Diego called Rancho Bernardo, and we had 30 people in the room. I talked to them for 3 hours. They talked back. We talked, and at the end of the time, I was scared to death. But I said, "How many people want to do this with me?" And Lord have mercy, everybody in the room raised their hand. I was astonished.
So, what are you advocating for? It's easy to say climate change is dangerous. I'm against it. What are you actually asking members of Congress to do?
Well, we have a great idea. It wasn't our idea at all. It's been around for a long time, and it's basically a Pagovian tax, and that just means it's a tax that you put on things that are harmful, like tobacco. They put a tax on tobacco, and people smoke less.
A Pagovian tax? I guess Pagov was the guy who came up with this idea?
There you go. I didn't, I was afraid to try to say it.
But no, look, we do it. We have sin taxes, we have tobacco tax, we have alcohol taxes. And in fact, the cigarette tax goes to a fund to help people quit smoking. So I guess we need to quit smoking carbon.
Well, yeah, but we don't think that it ought to go to a fund. We think that all the revenue ought to go to households, to people. And when they get that money in their pocket, what we found out with a national study is that they'll put it in their pocket and then they'll take it out and spend it right away, which makes the economy go faster.
So there's actually a proposal to do just that. Maryland Congressman Christopher Van Hollen has proposed more than a cap and trade, because a lot of people talk about capping and trading, of course, is you cap the level of carbon emissions that can go out nationwide, and then you allow companies to trade, because some will actually make more of a profit even if they pollute. So the ones that don't need to pollute and can save money that way, they allow it to trade. It's an economic system. But Van Hollen's proposal is cap, trade, and dividend, to take all the money that's collected via the tax and distribute it equally person to person across the United States. Is that a bill that you folks support?
No, well, we think there's a lot of good stuff in that bill. First of all, it's 100% dividend, and we think that's essential. Let me see, there's something else I really like about it, but it's a real good bill. It's well thought out, and hold on just a second. Yeah, no offsets. You know, when you were talking about cap and trade, and they were trading permits, but the problem in cap and trade really has to do with offsets. And so the bill that you're talking about that does not have any offsets in it. So we think it's overall a good bill, but we are waiting for a Republican to initiate the bill that we think where all of the money is rebated to the people, and there are no caps.
So what's an offset, and why is it bad?
Well, an offset, let's just say that somebody, ExxonMobil, for example, wants to, has a cap, and then they want to pollute above the cap. And so they would go reserve some large section of the Amazon rainforest that won't be cut down, and then that allows them to pollute above the cap. Well, there's all kinds of problems with that. One of which is that the Amazon rainforest may burn down anyway, and the guy you're dealing with may not really own it, and there's just all kinds of problems with it. And
so you want to cap and have the dividend, but no trade. Is that fair? It's cap and dividend.
No, what we want to do is just have a fee. When the coal, oil, gas comes out of the ground, there's a fee put on it that we calculate how much carbon dioxide is going to be produced, and then they pay a fee based on that. You could say it's a tax, and then all of that money is divided equally amongst the people in this country, and everybody gets a share. It's very much like the Alaskan fund that distributes the income off the oil royalties.
When you think about it, I mean, many of these are on public lands anyway, and even the ones that aren't, they're taking rock deep down in the surface that you could argue is sort of our national patrimony there. I guess my question for you is this: if you tax stuff coming out of the ground, then presumably you don't tax renewable resources, solar, wind, geothermal, and that encourages people to do those rather than the carbon stuff.
Right. It would encourage people to, the renewables would be relatively cheaper. When we get enough tax, it's a slow-moving tax. It goes up every year, about $10 at exactly $10 a ton, and at some point, that the renewables are comparatively less expensive than the oil, coal, and gas. Now, and when that happens, people begin to switch over, and investors see returns from the renewables.
Now, is your proposal identical to Congressman Van Hollen's, or are there some differences?
No, he has a cap. We don't have a cap. We just would escalate the tax over time, and people would make an economic decision as the tax went up.
I got you. Well, Marshall Saunders
would cap it. I think that there are problems with the cap.
Marshall Saunders, you've built a pretty large organization now. How many people in your organization?
Our organization?
Yeah. Thousands?
Yeah, well, we have about 6,000, believe it or not, we have about 6,000 members.
6,000 members, all committed to ending climate change. Our segment's about up. I want to thank you, Marshall, for coming on the show and sharing your vision with us. We've got lots more to talk about this. If you want to join in, it's 571-749-1166.
I do. Thank you very much. I'm not live. I didn't feel like I did very good.
Yeah, you did. I thought it was great.
I didn't fit the profile. I didn't smoke or drink. I had no family history of cancer. I was 31 years old. I went to see my dentist about a sore in my mouth that wouldn't heal. It was oral cancer. I had to have a radical neck dissection and a portion of my tongue reconstructed. I didn't know if I was going to live or die.
I'm Surgeon General Richard Carmona. The survival rate for oral cancer is only 50%. Oral cancer can happen to anyone. If you have a sore or lesion in your mouth that doesn't heal within 2 weeks, see your dentist. Early detection is the key.
Early detection saves lives. I know.
1 in 8 Americans goes hungry. One idea helped change that. A community started a garden that blossomed into farmers markets. 1 in 6 children lives in poverty. One group of women found an answer by opening a daycare center that their neighbors could afford. Today, 36 million Americans live in poverty. But one by one, people are helping themselves and each other to change the picture of poverty to one of hope. For easy ways you can help, visit povertyusa.org.
2 words for you. Pop quiz. Ready? Name any funny movie. A drama. Name a mystery. And one more thing. Name the movie your kids saw today in science class.
Know what really matters. Know about your kid's school and know about your kid. Find out 100 ways to know more, do more.
Legislative and Science, CCL. Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine. Sitting next to me now is another member of the Citizens Climate Lobby. It's Dr. Danny Richter, and he is the Legislative and Scientific Director, Science Director, I guess, of CCL. So it's part of your job to figure out how to take the science of climate change and put in legislation that works.
That's part of it, yes.
And the other part is?
Part of it is a lot of education. Because we have a lot of volunteers, there's some translation and education so that they're prepared when they meet with their members of Congress.
Okay, so first of all, are you dealing with members of Congress that still deny that climate change is happening?
Yes, we are.
Is that a lot of people?
It's decreasing, encouragingly. It's decreasing, and you're also seeing a shift in when they do deny it. They're giving ground. It's not happening. Man isn't causing it. It's happening, but I'm still not convinced that we're causing it, or maybe it's not as bad as we think.
Okay, so first ground is ultimate denial. It's not happening.
Yeah.
That's going away, not saying
Yes.
it's happening, but man isn't causing it.
Yeah.
And then I guess the third ground would be it's happening, man's causing it, but there's nothing we can do about it. That would be the third redoubt, the third fort, I guess, of denial.
I would suppose so, but we're not getting that very much. And
That's coming up.
Okay. Thanks.
No, I mean, it's all about sort of levels of denial. I assume that virtually every Democrat agrees with you.
Yeah, virtually every Democrat agrees on the science.
Okay.
On the policy, there are still differences.
And the science that mankind is causing climate change,
Yeah.
and it's a problem and a serious problem.
Yes.
Do the ones who deny that man's causing it, do they deny it's a serious problem?
They do, yes. They will deny that it's a serious problem.
Do you show them things like Norfolk raising its pier 14 feet? I mean, what do you have to show them to convince them that it's real?
Actually, so this part of my job is actually made easier because we really try and talk about the economics. Because our proposal, which Marshall was talking about earlier, is so positive on the economic side, and because that's something that Republicans in Congress are used to dealing with more, it's much better to talk about that than the science. If they're going to deny, they're going to deny. And if it hasn't broken through in the last 25, 26 years since I mark Dr. James Hansen's testimony as kind of the starting point, if it hasn't happened in that amount of time, I don't think it's going to happen now.
So what is the economics of this?
The economics, so Marshall mentioned we had a study done, and this was done by Regional Economic Models Incorporated. And there's two basic parts. The part one is the fee, and what that does is that reduces how many fossil fuels we burn. And the second part is the dividend.
Is it a fee per, I don't even know how you, barrel of oil that comes out of the ground? A fee per, how do you find?
It's per metric ton of CO2 equivalent into the atmosphere.
Okay.
So we know those numbers very well.
So you can tell how much a barrel of oil does, how much fracking does, how much each way of dealing with a fossil fuel, and it'll be different. Some pollute more than others, and those will be charged more than others.
Even different types of oil from different places. Burning one barrel of oil, if it comes from a different place, say Louisiana or Texas or Saudi Arabia, that will be different amount of CO2 in the atmosphere.
Really? Because of impurities, I guess?
Because of the content of the oil, yeah. So you have different, it has to do with the carbon length of the molecules. And more carbon strung together, fewer hydrogens, will result in more CO2.
Now you mentioned China, Saudi Arabia, in addition to Texas. One of the biggest complaints about laws against climate change, and I think it's a serious one, is okay, it's happening, okay, man causes it, and okay, we can do things to stop it, but it's the entire world. If the United States is the only actor and China is just pumping out tons and tons and they're not charging fees for their people, then it's a drop in the bucket, we're not going to do anything. And that seems to me a legitimate criticism.
That is no longer a legitimate criticism because 8 out of the 10 largest economies in the world have a carbon price in place already or
China
planned.
does?
China has regional cap and trade systems, and they're talking about a carbon tax by 2015 or 2016.
So China is about to do this. Everyone complains that China is cheating.
They're already doing it in the regional provinces. So actually, the only two out of that top 10 economies, United States and Russia. So it's us and Putin.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's not very good company. So the other countries that are doing it, China, India is also?
India was actually, so in that top 10, I'm counting California because it has its emissions trading scheme and it is the 10th largest economy in the world.
I see.
India is number 11.
And they're not doing it?
Not yet.
But is there anything proposed to do that?
Their recent leader has been making some noises about interest in addressing this problem, but there's nothing as of yet that I'm aware of.
What about Saudi Arabia? You mentioned Saudi Arabia.
I think Saudi Arabia, I'm not sure, but they wouldn't be, they're not one of the top 10 economies in the world.
Not one of the top 10 economies, but they are one of the top 10 fossil fuel producers.
They are, yes, but that's the beauty of the border adjustment, which is part of our proposal.
What's the border adjustment?
Border adjustment is if a fossil fuel or a fossil fuel intensive good comes into the United States across our borders, then we put the fee on there.
I see.
And
so oil that comes out of Saudi Arabia would be taxed when it entered the United States.
Yes, and if we do this, and if 8 out of the 10 largest economies in the world
doesn't matter where the oil is produced.
Doesn't matter where it's produced.
Now the other 8 would be, I guess, England, France, European Union countries.
European Union countries.
Japan, perhaps.
South Korea, Japan. Yes.
And they're all doing this.
They're all. It's not necessarily tax. It's the emissions trading scheme. So that would be cap and trade, a carbon price, and it's already in place or planned. There's been official motion to plan this through their lawmaking.
How is this different from Kyoto? The nations of the world came together, basically agreed on something similar to this. It didn't include emerging nations like China and India. Our Senate didn't ratify the deal. Is this Kyoto 2 or 3, or is it completely a different paradigm?
It's completely different paradigm because Kyoto was all the countries getting together and trying to figure out what to do together, whereas this, and the countries that have a carbon price planned or in place accounts for almost 50% of global carbon emissions. And they're doing it on their own. And so once the largest economy in the world, the United States, once they jump into this pile, I think that makes it a lot easier for you to get an international agreement.
Now, is the European Union working together, or are they separate into their various countries?
They are working together. Some countries have other policies, but they have an EU emissions trading scheme, ETS.
Okay, well you make a solid. That's actually the best international case I've heard.
Well,
because
thank you.
No, because usually I hear, well, yeah, okay, it's a real problem, but we're just one out of many. You're talking about a worldwide effort, and the best part about it is, unlike Kyoto, it doesn't require all of us to agree.
It does not, and I have to give credit here to the World Bank. They put out this study very recently. It was, I believe, it was the beginning of June. So World Bank is where you could find all the details.
Okay, now let's bring it home again.
Yeah.
Let's say you have an American who lives in Wyoming or Denver or, frankly, any of the interior of the United States.
Yeah.
Most of us don't live on the beach. How do they profit from this? Why should they care? I mean, we all want to help New Orleans and Miami, but we don't live in these beachfront areas. What can we do for the people of Denver?
Oh, there's so many ways to answer this. I mean, the first way is we are one nation, and we all take care of. We should be taking care of each other to a certain extent and be interested in our mutual benefit. The second one, this study, it actually broke the United States into 9 regions and united by several common factors. And it finds that all of those regions have a reason to be interested in our policy and to want our policy to happen.
And I chose Denver as the most mountainous interior place I could think of. How would Colorado be helped by a policy like that?
Well, they recently had some really serious floods, which the whole, you can't attribute.
So climate change isn't just about the beach.
It's absolutely not just about the beach. And the other thing is, if you have people who are on the coasts, like we learned with Katrina, they have to go somewhere, and that places a burden on people in the interior. So whether they like it or not, they're going to have climate refugees. Some places already have. I believe Houston was extremely generous with receiving people after Katrina.
So climate change isn't just about flooding coastal areas. It's about having hotter summers than we used to have, not having the colder winters that we used to have, which is necessary for, as I recall, to keep out some insects or various disease causing things?
I saw someone, I believe he was a commander in the Navy. He sees climate change about water. I mean, it makes sense, being in the Navy, but really some of the biggest effects are too much water or too little water. Coastal flooding would be one example. Torrential rains would be another example, or too little. The drought that California is going through. But this all also relates to farming, agriculture. We all eat food, and these people in the interior, a lot of them are farmers, or a lot of them are involved with that economy, and it's always been an uncertain occupation. It's becoming more uncertain.
We've seen a lot of wild weather in the past 5-10 years. Last winter was colder than normal. They told us the polar vortex got off its path and actually dipped down into the United States. Is that caused by global warming, or is that something completely different? Do we know?
I think that we're still trying to, scientists are very finicky about attributing blame, but the reason why this...
Causation.
Thank you. The reason why we think this could be related, the jet stream is established by temperature differentials. So if it's colder in one place, warmer in another place, that's a temperature differential. The Arctic has been warming quicker than the equator. So that is weakening. Because the Arctic is warmer and the equator isn't as warm, you're weakening that temperature differential. And that weakens the jet stream and enables it to become more wavy or wiggly.
One last question, Danny, and I see this in almost anything we undertake. First you deny the problem, then you say we're studying the problem, then you say, okay, we'll be there in a minute, and then you say too late, we can't do anything about it. Isn't there a concern, a real concern, that the Arctic ice cap is melting and we can't reverse it, we can't put that ice back together? It's too late. Here comes the deluge. There's nothing we can do now.
Since when has America been defeatist? I mean, that is un-American, plain and simple. And what we need to do is the more action we do today, the fewer problems our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren are going to have in the future. And so there is no action that is unwarranted for those future generations. And we need to accept responsibility for this problem that we've created.
Well, you're clearly very good at defending your position, and hopefully you're training others to do the same. People come to Washington and I guess you give a speech and you teach them how to lobby?
It's the staff. We recently had 600 volunteers, and we met with 507 separate congressional offices in our lobby day. So we train everybody. We have people who would be experts. We have people who are not experts, but they all get better.
Well, I really appreciate your information, particularly the international stuff. I hadn't heard that before. Danny, thank you for coming on the Inside Scoop. We have lots more to talk about this, and I want to encourage you folks to call in as well. It's easy to do. Pick up the phone, dial 571-749-1166. You can ask a question of me or of my guests, and if you're a climate skeptic, we even more want you to call in. We'll be right back right after this.
Just books at the library.
There's more than just books at the library.
Excuse me. There's more than just books at the library.
Il y a plus que de livres à la bibliothèque.
Hello. You have a lot of great books here today. There's more than just books at the library.
I know.
There's more than just books at the library.
I don't want to be hooked to a machine.
I want all the medical treatment available to me.
I wouldn't want my family to have to make this decision.
My doctor knows what's best for me.
An advance directive is your life on your terms. Talk with your family. Decide what's right for you. Then put it in writing.
Documenting my wishes today means my family won't have to make heart-wrenching decisions later.
To learn more, visit www.putitinwriting.org.
1,200 American youth run away from their homes every day. The National Runaway Switchboard is here to help. 1-800-RUNAWAY. If you are a runaway, Thinking about running away from home, or a parent or guardian concerned about issues facing your child, call us 24 hours a day. 1-800-RUNAWAY. In times of crisis, hope is just a phone call away. 1-800.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. Today, we're devoting the entire hour to the Citizens Climate Lobby because, well, not many people are doing very much on climate change, at least in the United States. We just heard from Danny Richter. They're doing a lot of stuff around the world that I have to admit even surprised me. But the question is, what are we doing here? And my next guest is a strategic coordinator for the Citizens Climate Lobby. It's Joseph Robertson. Welcome back. We had a conversation a month ago or so ago. As strategic coordinator, you're coordinating strategy. What the heck does that mean?
It means that I do a lot of things. A big part of it is educating volunteers, helping to answer their questions on economics and on legislative process and things like that. It also means that I work on our international outreach. I help train our groups overseas and work on the things we do with the World Bank and sort of looking for another way forward that's not just one big treaty where everybody has something in that particular package.
Like Kyoto.
Yeah.
So what are the economics of this? I mean, I've heard it from the right. This will cost jobs. We can't possibly do this. This is a job killer. I mean, you must have heard that 1,000 times. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's not a job killer. That's the first thing. It's you go just straight at that and you can show how that is. And fortunately, the study that Danny was talking about earlier from REMI showed that when you put 100% of the revenues back into the everyday economic activities of ordinary Americans, you give that dividend to households, what it does is it causes the Main Street economy to take off.
Well, that's true just as a matter of basic economics. It stimulates the economy. It's like a tax cut.
Yeah, and so the nice thing about the fee and dividend strategy is you're not just putting that steadily rising fee on a particular activity that's bad for the overall economy because it adds cost everywhere in a hidden way, but you're giving these resources back to ordinary people so that they can then use it in their everyday lives. So it's not just a one-time stimulus, it's not a lump sum, it's something. A
monthly check, an annual check, and what about the administrative costs of getting all those checks out there?
So it's a monthly check or direct deposit, and there are a lot of reasons for that. The main reason is that you don't want ordinary people carrying the costs of the industry. That's the problem we have right now, is that the costs are externalized to society. So we get that off of the backs of ordinary people, and they don't have to carry the burden of the rising fee for 12 to 16 months.
How much are we talking about per person? What would it end up being? $5, $10, $20?
It starts out in the $40, $50 range per month, and then it starts to go up year after year.
And it's per person?
Per person, yeah.
So if you live alone, you might get $40, $50. You got a family of 4, you might be close to $200.
Yeah, initially, and then it starts to go up every month as the fee steadily rises.
Okay, that sounds great, but of course there are costs. Will my gasoline prices go up?
They will, but it's not very noticeable. For instance, a $15 per metric ton fee on carbon emissions is going to equate to about 13 cents increased gasoline prices. So that's the kind of thing we see from week to week all the time with the fossil fuel industry. We already know how to absorb that, and most of us do. The thing is that when you get the dividend check, you actually have not just enough to deal with those costs, but also all the other costs that come at you through the economy.
So what other things would go up? Gas is the most obvious one. What would be more expensive?
Well, so,
home heating oil? I don't even know.
Yeah, so anything that uses carbon-based energy, people are going to have to pay a little bit more for that energy, so there's going to be a little bit of an increase. And so you could see how the whole economy would get a little bit pricier. But that's why we want people to have
What about my
the
electric
dividend.
bills? I guess they'd go up a little bit.
That would depend. It would depend on what kind of mix
Whether
of energy
it's coal
sources.
or wind. If it's wind, I wouldn't see an increase. If it's coal, I would.
Yeah, what you generally see when you have a carbon price in place is that utilities start to move away from the high polluting fuels and towards something else because they can't continue to increase prices forever.
Now, Danny had mentioned 8 of the nation's largest economies are already starting this kind of thing. Have we seen a really successful case study? Can we say Japan does it right, or France, or Italy, or England, someone else?
British Columbia has a really good track record. You can look at what happened during the Great Recession. Most of the provinces in Canada experienced what the rest of us experienced, but British Columbia stayed buoyant. It didn't go into deep recession. It didn't have big job losses.
Because it had this regular...
Because it has a carbon tax policy in place that returns some of the revenues. It's not 100% dividend, but it returns revenues to households in order to make sure that the cost doesn't fall.
And you support 100% return. I mean, obviously there'll be some administrative costs, so maybe 98, 99%.
Well, the administrative costs are, different estimates would say, if you add these costs on top of the already existing budget, it could be something like anywhere from 0.1% to 3%. Safer estimates are 1% to 2%. But the thing is that what happens when you have a policy like this, you're only going to be putting the fee on a couple thousand entities. The IRS rolls that into its already existing budget. It doesn't need to hire a big new staff. There's no new bureaucracy created or anything like that.
Now, you want to reward every man, woman, and child. So you have an infant, you get an extra check. Is that how that works?
The way it works is the dividend goes to each household, up to 2 full shares for adults and up to 2 half shares for children under 18. So a total of 3 possible shares for any household.
Oh, so if you have a household, you have 7 kids, you still only get three shares.
Yeah, because the idea is you want to be able to give people what they need to not be carrying the burden of the fossil fuel industry's costs. But when you have more people in a home, you still have a home of a certain size. So the energy bill doesn't keep increasing exponentially with every person.
Now, is this your proposal that you've written down, that CCL has written down and proposed? And if so, how is it similar to or different than Congressman Van Hollen's proposal?
So, as you mentioned earlier, Congressman Van Hollen's bill has a cap. It has permits. It has the trading of those permits. It does have 100% dividend, which we like. It does not allow for any offsets for permit holders. It also doesn't allow open trading on speculative financial markets of those permits. Those are all good things. But the Van Hollen bill has a steadily declining cap, which has to be enforced somehow. And we prefer economically and also administratively a steadily rising fee, because we know that the steadily rising fee will disallow
that way
an increase
there's
in
no
pollution.
arguments about the cap size. You don't have people saying, aha, it's this. No, it's this. This way the fee rises, and then people can say, well, there's a range. It's from this level to this level.
And because what the REMI study showed is that the Main Street economy keeps chugging along and incomes rise, and there's money in the economy to create demand
for
other
gas
things.
Tax right now for the highways, and we've had it for, I don't know, 50 years, and quite a long time.
Well, because there's this increased economic activity, the industry can actually begin to plan around that rising fee. It's a steady signal that charts a course. So instead of being worried that this is going to kill off their business, they can say, okay, the cost of our business is being revealed openly, and now we can plan more intelligently, make smart investments.
Okay, but the argument for cap and trade, and it is a economic argument, it's really it began as a conservative plan, is to basically say that there are some industries that will pollute more than others, but provide these fantastic economic benefits, so much so they'll pay the penalty to pollute a little more, and that's better for the economy, and then the ones who don't pollute will get a little bit back. Why not allow this kind of trading?
Well, so when you impose the cap, what you're doing is you're making a statement of purpose. You're saying that here's a new rule and you're going to have to follow that rule. You have to do something to enforce that rule. You need a regulatory mechanism.
You got to go check on them, see how much they're
Yeah, you have to check to make sure that the actual emissions that flow from whatever is going on are being kept under control.
But you have to check right now. I mean, every metric ton of oil that comes out of the ground, you got to check, right?
Well, the nice thing about when you just have a straightforward fee is that the businesses that are selling fossil fuels, they have to report their sales, they have to report their income, the volume of what they're selling on the open market.
So they don't have to do anything other than what they already do.
Well, exactly, because it has already known carbon content, that's what's being priced. And so what they report to the IRS gets audited or doesn't, depending on how well they keep their books.
Sounds a lot simpler and a lot easier to implement, a lot easier to understand. Should I choose to run for Congress again? Now you've persuaded me. I'll put
Excellent.
it that way.
All right.
And I certainly would like to, because Chris Van Hollen's a very responsible person. I think he could be persuaded as well. Your real problem, of course, is not the Democrats. Your real problem is the people, the Republicans, who deny that this is even happening, not based on science, but based on lobbying and money and politics and so forth. How do you cross that bridge? How do you reach out to a community that really is in denial? And I mean that in all senses of the word.
So, there are a lot of people who are under pressure to show that they're on that side. They get a lot of money spent against them if they dare to speak up. Last year, 5 members of the House were targeted with millions of dollars in ads, denouncing them as soft on climate policy.
And money speaks in politics.
And so there's that pressure. But when you talk to people about their concerns, one of the things that we train our volunteers to do, and that we try to do every time we talk to anyone, is pay attention to what they say, pay attention to what they care about, and listen. And if you treat people's concerns as valid, then you begin to communicate with them more effectively.
If they're worried about jobs in their district, you can say, well, we're going to increase jobs in your district by so much numbers.
Yeah, because when someone sets out to say what they want their policies to achieve, they're not saying, I want to protect an industry or I want to serve some interest that helps my campaign. They're saying, I want to help ordinary people. I want to do the right thing. I want to be on the right side of history. And so they may be under a lot of pressure for certain reasons, but if you can provide people in the legislature with options, with solutions, things they can do that are going to meet their principles and serve the goals that they're after, you can start to build a coalition.
We only have about a minute left. I know you wanted to talk about global policy.
Sure.
I wasn't sure which aspect you wanted to talk about, so I leave it as an open question. What can we do globally?
So, right now we're entering into this year, or year and a quarter or so of big global negotiations that are going to lead to what is supposed to be the successor to Kyoto.
Kyoto 2.
And so everybody's thinking about some big, ball of yarn, some big tangled thing where everybody gets their piece of the pie. And there are reasons why that's hard to achieve. The main reason is that you're trying to please everybody at the same time. And what Danny was saying earlier about when you have border adjustments that allow us to harmonize policies between different markets, each country can move forward on its own. The economics that we see from the REMI studies show that if we do this here at home, our plan, the fee and dividend plan, we'll benefit no matter what anybody else does, and we can lead the way. The World Bank is showing that all kinds of carbon pricing options are good for economies, some more affluent than others. It's the country that puts in place that policy that starts to heal what's wrong with the marketplace for energy and benefit. So each country can do its own thing and start to harmonize, and we're hoping that we get people around the world talking about that more streamlined approach.
And the World Bank, it has a section committed to climate change specifically.
Yes, it does.
Which is there a name for that? Or?
There's a cross-cutting climate program.
Cross-cutting climate program at the World Bank. Joseph Robertson, thank you. This is very instructive, and I understand it even better now. And like I said, it makes sense to me. So, Chris Van Hollen and other members of Congress, listen up. You too, Don Beyer. We'll be right back after this.
Osama bin Laden calls getting nuclear weapons a religious duty.
Today, materials that can be used to make nuclear weapons are stored in more than 40 countries.
Sometimes protected by just a chain link fence.
Yet not enough is being done to lock down these materials
before terrorists steal them.
Why did we learn all this?
My mother.
My son.
My sister-in-law.
Were all murdered September 11th.
Help protect America.
Together we can.
Please join us.
The stem cell issue is being debated throughout the country. Truth is, most everyone has an opinion, even if they don't know the facts.
Let's stop arguing and start really understanding the potential of stem cell research.
For us and for millions of Americans living with disabilities, get the facts.
Call 1-877-842-3442 for free information from the Stem Cell Research Foundation. That's 1-877-842-3442.
Following the tragic events of September 11th, there have been hundreds of violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
One nation under God.
Indivisible.
With liberty
And justice.
for all.
In America, there's either room for everyone, or it's not America.
Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
Planning a home renovation? Put this at the top of your to-do list. Because after 10 years, none of you are protected against tetanus and another potentially fatal disease, diphtheria. A minor injury, such as a cut or a scrape, can put you at risk for a tetanus infection. And while safety gear offers some protection, an up-to-date vaccination called the TD Booster is the best insurance against tetanus. So get the TD Booster. If it's been 10, do it again.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. There's still time to call in if you have any questions or comments, agree or disagree. We always welcome our callers at 571-749-1166. I think they're so fascinated by the content that they're just watching, which is just fine too. My next guest is Mrs. Cindy Burbank. You are the Virginia coordinator for the Citizens Climate Lobby.
Yep.
How long have you been involved at CCL?
About a year and a half.
A year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So a year and a half and you're already in charge of all of Virginia. Wow, that's pretty good. Watch out, you're going to be the national.
Rising fast.
You are. You're right. You're rising very fast. So you come at this without the scientific background, the economic background some of my experts have. You came at this just a caring person that wants to make a difference.
Well, I am a caring person that wants to make a difference.
You're also a scientist and an
I'm also an economist.
Oh, you are an economist.
I am an economist.
There you go. So you've got
and
some
I worked in the
training
federal government for a long time, and I did a lot of consulting on climate change. So
this is interesting. So your background is an economist focused on this issue or on something else?
Yes.
Focused on the economics of climate change?
Yes.
So, well then I have to ask you a technical question, because I think those are, before we get to the volunteer stuff, what happens if we do nothing? I think that anytime you have a choice to make and a policy choice, it's easy to advocate, we should do this, we should do this. Tell me what happens if we dither around. It's certainly, we have the do nothing as Congress ever in American history that's going on in recess. Let's say we do nothing for 20 years. What happens?
If we do nothing for 20 years, we are going to see steadily intensifying climate impacts. We're already seeing them. The acidification of the ocean. We're going to see more severe storms. We're going to see sea level rise. We're going to see a lot of damage. There will be some good effects. We'll have a longer growing season in the north. My home state of Vermont won't be as cold.
There you go.
But it will be costly. We'll see impacts, and they will be costly.
What are the economic impacts?
New report that came out, Risky Business does a great job of documenting that. It's from the agricultural sector, where our crops are concentrated now. The growing season and the crops are worsened, so you have to pay higher costs for food. It is the damage from severe storms like Katrina, Irene in my home state of Vermont.
Or what just happened in Japan.
Or what just happened in Japan.
Typhoon.
Severe storms. It is things like in Colorado in the west, the wildfires that they're having, and the severe drought.
California as well.
The drought in California, in Texas, and they have economic costs. And Risky Business is a new report.
So you've been around a year and a half, but you've been involved in this quite a long time before. Okay,
yes.
You're no newbie here.
I'm not a newbie.
Fair enough.
Yep.
Okay. There are some people who are, though.
Yep.
There are people who do not have your economics training, do not have science training. They simply see this and they're nervous. I mean, all you have to do, frankly, is, and I have an economics degree myself, but I'm not a scientist, but I can see the polar ice cap melting.
Yeah.
And that's weird and frightening. I'm used to the polar ice cap. That's what you do. You know, that's the North Pole is under ice. That's what it is. And it's been that way for hundreds of years, for millennia actually, and now it's going, and that's really scary.
It is scary.
So someone who is simply scared but doesn't have the scientific and economic training but wants to make a difference, what can they reasonably do?
Well, there are all kinds of things they can do at the individual level to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, from keeping their tires inflated, combining their trips, watching the thermostat in the house, all kinds of things. And at a political level, they can get involved communicate it to their neighbors, communicate it to their congressman, write letters to the editor. And that's what CCL is all about grassroots effort, raise the awareness about not only what the problem is, but what the solution is, what we can do individually and collectively from the grassroots up.
You're the Virginia coordinator.
Yes.
So how are we doing in Virginia? How is Senator Kane, Senator Warner, you know what?
We've been talking
It's
to
your
them.
platform. Some of them support offshore drilling, so they're not perfect by any stretch.
There are lots of issues, but we're talking to them. They're a bit cautious because of the politics in Virginia, but I do not see the denial, even from the very conservative members.
Even the Republicans?
There are some who are in denial, but even some of the conservatives that we are talking to in Congress they've met with us 3 or 4 times. They listen to us about the science. They ask good questions. They don't say it's not happening. I see that changing.
It's kind of hard to deny it when you see the polar ice cap melting. I mean, you can't deny a satellite photo.
And as we change public awareness, as the public itself looks around and sees things changing, that gets communicated at a political level. Very encouraging thing just happened. Last month, there were 2 sets of national surveys done. The first was by the Wall Street Journal and NBC News, and it found that more than 60% of people believe that climate change is happening. It's caused by man largely, and strong policies are needed.
You see that as positive to me. Only 60%, when 99% of scientists.
It's moving in the right direction.
All right, fair. It used to be less than half.
Yes, when the economy was at its worst, it was down in the 30s.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's doubled in just 5-6 years.
Yes, it
has.
No,
that is
There's definitely a trend. Second poll that was very important, especially to CCL, University of Michigan and Muhlenberg University, asked people about climate change and whether they would support a carbon fee. And if it would be rebated to households, as we propose, more than 50% said yes, they would support it.
Let me suggest to you, as someone who's been around Washington a while and used to work in Congress, that the old Federalist idea that the states are the laboratory of democracy, that if a state shows it working really well, you're much more likely to go nationwide. And one of the things that Danny was talking about was that California is already doing something.
Yeah.
What is California doing?
Well, California enacted a broad law on global climate change, and within that, the most dramatic thing is a cap and trade program, which is...
Are they doing fee and dividend, though?
They're not doing fee and dividend, but it is a market-type mechanism that is at least moving in the right direction.
Do they return money to the people?
I don't think so.
See, I think that's a negative. I think that people, if they start seeing checks coming in their pocket, they're going to support you a lot more. Is California the most far-reaching? Is anyone doing a fee and dividend
not in the United States. No, we got the northeastern states doing something.
You said your home state's Vermont. Vermont is one of the bluest of the blue states.
It is.
I think Vermont would be a great place to get it started there. I'm sure Bernie Sanders would support it.
Yes, probably would. And if I could just, I have some pictures of Vermont to pull up. First, this quote that underlies our strategy about democracy requires space for compromise, and it's best won through acknowledging the legitimate concerns of the other. So we are reaching out to conservatives as well as liberals and formulating our approach based on that, and patiently listening to other points of view. The pictures, Vermont, you mentioned. I grew up in Vermont.
Let's pull up the slides, if we could, please.
So I grew up in Vermont. It's very close to my heart. And you may recall that 2 years ago, 2011, 3 years ago, Vermont was hit by Irene. Wasn't expecting it. Everybody was braced for further south. It hammered Vermont with the worst flooding they had seen in over 80 years. Cut off 13 communities, destroyed people's livelihoods and their homes. Those pictures just illustrate that.
I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, and it's funny, people in Nashville still talk about it, but the country missed the fact that one of the greatest floods we've ever had occurred in Nashville. It was a weird flash flood. Nashville, I have to tell you, and I grew up there, we're not like New Orleans. We don't have levees. We don't worry because we're below sea level. No disrespect to New Orleans, they have a geographic location that you can understand why they're concerned about water. We in Nashville, we're up in the hills. The Cumberland River's a pretty small river, and we have massive floods, take out massive homes, and the whole rest of the country hardly noticed. But as
it was
a
like a
Nashvilleian,
1,000-year flood, yes.
But it really wiped out just hundreds and hundreds of homes. And I got to tell you, if you folks outside of Nashville don't talk about it very much.
Yeah.
But you should.
Ironically, 2 days after that flood in Nashville, I was going there. I went there to do a climate change workshop for the transportation agency. So I saw it firsthand.
Yeah. It was devastation.
And they were still
again,
shutting down their water plants.
Right.
And so forth. Yeah.
So it's all kinds of areas you don't even think are going to be affected by climate change.
It's
Nashville's
not
inland. It's not on the coast.
Not just New Orleans and Norfolk and New York.
No, and Miami is affected by it. So let's get back to our concerned citizen who wants to help, but really is not an economist, is not a scientist, is just worried about the state of her nation and her world. What can she do? What should she do?
Get informed. Check out.
How does she join CCL?
It's easy to join CCL. There are no fees. You just go on our website and sign up and start participating.
That's great, because a lot of organizations have fees.
Exactly.
You just go to ccl.org? No.
Yeah, www.citizensclimatelobby.org.
Citizensclimatelobby.org. And if you're here in Virginia, then they could be working with you.
That's true.
Okay. Do we have any more slides? Let's see if there's any other.
Those were some earlier slides about the
fair enough. I wanted to show the devastation. This is Vermont. Oops, trying to get this up here.
Yeah, but that's somebody's home.
Yeah.
And all kinds of highways. I was in the transportation business where 13 communities were totally cut off for a while. That's the base lodge at Killington. That was where people's jobs are. So
if people want to get involved, they simply sign up, and then what happens? You teach them how to. People like Joseph and Denny and you teach people how to lobby.
We do teach them how to lobby.
And it's not that hard.
How to write a letter to the editor, how to talk to their neighbors, whatever they want to do and feel comfortable with.
I assume on your website you've got lots of policy and reports to support the science, because there's skeptics out there. And I mean, I've been on Fox News arguing with Eric Bolling. He said it's snowing, therefore there can't be global warming. And I had to explain that you get more snow when there's more moisture in the air.
So you are a scientist.
Well, I'm learning. I wouldn't call myself a scientist, but the politics of this thing, that's the hard part. That's the hard nut to crack, because there are vested interests that make billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions, I think, of dollars in the fossil fuel industry. You got the Koch brothers. They make their fortune off the fossil fuels, and all we are a bunch of citizens. Does it ever feel hopeless at times?
Not a bit. It's getting so much more encouraging. In fact, many of those energy companies, Exxon, et cetera, they recognize climate change is happening, that a carbon fee is probably coming. They're incorporating it in their strategic planning now.
So they're already
We
ready
met
for
with
it.
Dominion Power and had a very good conversation, some very helpful suggestions from them about who to talk with in state government.
But they're still using coal.
They're fast getting out of it, though. They've converted a lot to natural gas.
Okay, we'll see. I'm still a little skeptical of the skeptics.
And natural gas isn't pure. We've still got a long ways to go.
It does, but thank you very much for coming on the show. Thank you, everyone, for listening in and for doing what you can to stop what really is slow-moving disaster, but one that if we don't stop now, we all have to worry about. Thank you for coming inside.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Sure.